Welcome back to Way Out of Left Field. We're Leanne and Brent, and this summer we're hitting the road for the adventure of a lifetime. Together with our chocolate lab Casey, we're traveling from the west coast of British Columbia all the way to the Yukon. And this video picks up where our last video, called The First 10 Days, left off. If you haven't seen it, I'll put a link up and you can go back and watch it. Brent and I are on our way to Whitehorse, the capital of the Yukon and a city right on the banks of the Yukon River. But before we get there, we've got some places in BC that we need to stop and see as we make our way up the Alaska Highway. It is now June 26th and we are leaving Tetsa River. Our next campground destination is the Liard River Hot Springs, but we do have a few sights and stops to see along the way. Our next stop ended up being Toad River, but that one wasn't one we had planned on. There are a number of bridges along the Alaska Highway, and some of them have metal decking. And it was just one of those bridges that caught the edge of our truck tire and ripped a hole in it. It was a bit of a shock to lose air so fast and to have to get a spare tire put on in a bit of a precarious spot on the side of the highway. But we did have several people come to a stop and ask if we needed help. We got back on the road and I checked our travel guide, the milepost, and immediately saw and noticed that a few miles ahead was Toad River, which had, among a number of services, a tire repair shop. So with great relief, we pulled in, and about 40 minutes later, we had a replacement tire back on our truck, our spare tire tucked back under the truck, and with a handshake and many grateful thank yous, we paid $100 and we're on our way. Muncho Lake is one that we had seen photos and heard people describe a number of times, but it really is something spectacular to see the bright colors of the water and the sand in person. Of course, Casey got to have a swim, and even Brent was brave enough to take off his shoes and test the water himself. Now, it may look tropical, but the temperature was definitely far more Arctic. When we finally pulled in to the Liard River Hot Springs campground, we were ready to set up and chill out in the warm waters. Liard River is notorious for bears, so the campground has installed electric fencing all the way around. It definitely gave off a bit of a Jurassic Park kind of vibe, and at times we sort of wondered if the fence was maybe there to keep the bears out or perhaps to keep the tourists in. Liard Hot Springs itself is something pretty special. It is outside the electric fence area along a 0.8 kilometer boardwalk, but the entire hot spring body of water is cut into the ground, and so the plants, roots, and soil all along the sides feel truly jungle-like. Brent took a swim down a narrow passage, ducking under trees and branches. It was a little spooky, but also incredibly cool. While we were there, the mosquitoes and black flies were a bit relentless, so it was fairly common to see weird women like me donning net hats. 2 nights and 3 soaks in the hot springs, and we were off once again. Now, we mentioned in our introductory video that one of the things we were looking forward to seeing on this trip was wildlife. And by that, we were looking for more than just squirrels and rabbits and groundhogs. Up to this point, that's all we had seen. We wanted sightings of some of the big guys. And boy, the wood bison did not disappoint. We did not see them very often, but on this day, in perfect order, we saw a single one, and then a pair, and at long last, an entire herd. And if you look closely, you can see in the back, in the trees, there's at least another couple dozen of them. Everybody just lounging about, enjoying the quiet afternoon, and offering us an incredible photo opportunity. At this point, we were approaching the Yukon border. So as soon as the sign appeared, we pulled over to get a picture and, of course, to leave a sticker. Entering the Yukon felt like a big milestone for the trip. BC is a huge province, and we were going to see a lot more of it on the second half of our trip. But at this point, to make it all the way from the southwest coast to the border near Watson Lake was over 3,000 kilometers, and it felt great to finally arrive. We made it to our campground at Watson Lake, and again, we got all set up to stay for 2 nights. And the next day, we went in to see the famous Signpost Forest. The story behind the Signpost Forest is that back in 1942, a homesick soldier working on the Alaska Highway decided to put up a sign on a tree indicating how many miles he was away from home. Well, the gesture caught on, and now, 84 years later, they estimate that there's over 100,000 signs posted from every corner of the world, and this has been designated a Yukon historic site. So obviously, we needed to leave our sign here as well. We had so much fun walking around, looking at all of the signs and seeing where they had come from. Some of them imagining how the heck people brought some huge ones here from continents away. The difficult decision was not just where we wanted to put our sign, but where the heck we were going to find a spot to do so. So after a bit of searching, Brent spotted the top left post of an antique fire truck shelter. That seemed like a good spot. But it was going to take a little bit of fancy footwork and climbing on Brent's part to get it way up there. Also, we just want to apologize to Cheryl and Falco for standing on your sign. I assure you it was not damaged and it still looks great. We also found a good spot on the big yellow bulldozer for me to put another one of our way out of left field stickers on. While in Watson Lake, we also took in a planetarium-like show at the Northern Lights Center, explaining the science and the folklore of the Northern Lights. We left Watson Lake on the morning of June 30th, and at this point, the Alaska Highway dips back down into BC a few times, so there was more than one welcome to the Yukon sign, and we did leave our sticker at a couple of them. Casey ends up having to spend an awful lot of time in his cage when we're traveling, so as we came into Teslin and saw the beach, we made sure to pull over and let him go for a swim. Later that afternoon, we pulled into Wolf Creek, which was to be our campground for the night. It's about 20 minutes south of Whitehorse, so a great location. And it's also situated right on the Wolf Creek itself. So with all that raging water, the bugs seem to be kept at bay. So it's July 1st, Canada Day. So we needed to explore Whitehorse. So here we are, strolling along the boardwalk, along the shores of the Yukon River, taking in the scenes of the celebrations. We checked out the Woodcutter's Blanket for a sampling of craft beers and a glass of wine. Took a walk through the city, checking out some of the cool stores and historic buildings, which is how we found ourselves at the Rib and Salmon for an early dinner. The food was great, and the old building and decor was super fun. After dinner and on our way back to the campground, we stopped at Miles Canyon to go for a walk. Holy, the crazy green color of the water and the sheer rock walls along the river were just wild. I really was wishing I could have flown the drone and gotten a better big picture view of it. The next day, we were back in Whitehorse to check out a bunch of museums. We saw the McBride Museum of Yukon History, showcasing some of the colorful characters that built Canada's Yukon. And we saw the Beringia Interpretive Center, which focuses on the history of one of the few places in Canada to remain ice-free during the last ice age. Even Casey got a chance to visit a baby mammoth and make friends. And then we visited the old log church. It was one of the oldest buildings still in its original location in Whitehorse. July 3rd, when we were leaving Whitehorse, the weather was turning really cold. So how fortunate was it that we were heading just north of Whitehorse to spend a few nights at the Takini Hot Spring Campground. The Eclipse Nordic Hot Springs is a really short walk away, so we spent a day hanging out there and warming up. Very fancy, very nice, but unfortunately they didn't allow photographs inside of the facility. The next day, we visited the Yukon Wildlife Preserve. The preserve itself is about 750 acres, but there is a self-guided walking tour that you can do that is about a 5-kilometer distance. It was a beautiful, warm, sunny day when we did it. Well, we've only been able to see bison alongside of the road, so this was an opportunity to see some elk, caribou, muskox, and moose, as well as some mountain goats and thin-horned sheep. It's July 6th, and our time at the Hot Spring Campground was over. We were crossing the Yukon River once again, and after heading through Carmacks, we were intrigued by the historic Montague Roadhouse, so we stopped to have a look. Quite the fixer-upper project, and we were tempted. But Tatchin Creek was awaiting us, so we pushed on and set up the trailer once again. And that brings us to the end of this video, as the next morning we were back on the road. Well, if you could call it a road. The Klondike Highway became an adventure all of its own, and it was the only road to Dawson City.